So jumping into game two now. Uh, Griddle remains on the red side here. Goated remains on the blue side. Keep in mind this is fearless. So any champions that were picked in game one are not going to be picked in game two. Shout out Blue Otter League for using fearless. Very, very, very good format. So again, for bans, I am not going to go over too much. The first wave of bans. It looks like Unara is also not on this app yet. Wow. All right. So ban 3 on blue side was Unara. Red side goes Trundle, Wukong, and Smolder. Goated did take down game 1, and it kind of went a little bit. The Smolder's on here either. Jesus, old app. A little bit how I was talking about in draft of, hey, red side got a bit of an early lead, but they weren't properly punishing it. There were some misplays, some over pushes, and blue side ended up just dominating the team fights a little bit. That, in my opinion, is actually a really, really good game to VOD review and talk about, hey, we have these different leads in these different areas. Who do we need moving in what spots? How do we cover? How do we punish? How do we snowball, right? Those are, in my opinion, are actually like the best games to VOD review. It's easier to talk about losses for harder to pull off team comps than wins for blue side's team comp in game 1, where it's like, hey, yeah, we just don't die early and we try to stop the bleeding, and then eventually we just outscale and we win, right? So red side's an interesting game to talk about. But going into game 2, reset mental, reset draft, pushing in for the B1 on Goated. So Goated sticking with the ADC B1 theme. Sorry, that is not going there. You are going there. Caitlyn on the B1. Very, very similar to the Jinx, it seems like, where they want to just prioritize a long-range, standard, strong ADC. But Caitlyn is a little bit worse of a V1 than Jinx is. Caitlyn is a lot more volatile in terms of if she gets shut down, she does not scale very well like the Jinx still will. She has some bad matchups in the bot lane. And in general, she actually just doesn't have too many pairings that you're scared of. She has Kate Lux, Kate Karma, a little bit of the Nico these days, and that's really it. You know, Caitlyn can be paired with those engaged supports, but you're not as scared of that as something like an iconic Kate Lux, right? So, interesting pick here. To go with the Kate early. They're kind of setting the tone here, right? You're expecting the Kate Lux pretty much always coming to B2, B3. So we could preemptively R1, R2 here a good lane into Kate Lux. I'm personally a big fan of Nautilus into Kate Lux. I think it's much easier to pull off the hard engaged supports than it is to pull off the Kate Lux. I think a properly executed Kate Lux is probably going to win more times than not against any lane. But, you know, I'm not talking about this like a theoretical challenge or pro-level draft. This is, hey, it is what it is in terms of elo. Kate Lux, eventually someone's going to misstep. Eventually someone's going to eat a hook, whether it's Leona, Nautilus, whatever champion. It's going to be hard for them to play. So Griddle responds with their AD carry of Varus. I definitely like this a lot. Varus is super strong right now and is also setting up some sort of engaged support pick. Varus is actually surprised it was up in game 1 as well and wasn't picked personally. I'm glad it's being picked up here. Assuming this is going to be a lethality poke Varus, that is what's kind of in ADC meta right now, and it's super, super strong. It will do very well into the Kate Lux and kind of match their poke. Another option I would like to think of here is always a Ziggs. It's a nice flex pick to put early, and it really, really does well into Kate Lux, right? Because Kate Lux is a shut you down kind of neutralizing lane that wants to push tower early, and Ziggs really prevents that. Again, since you have the red side as well, you're going to have that R5 counter pick that lets you play towards your top side. So that early Ziggs really just gets the immediate idea of, hey, I could wave clear, I could shut down, I don't have to stand in their range. I could play safe. My support can go roam. He can go win mid. He can go win top. He can go win jungle. And we'll be okay. If you want to go a little bit more bitch mode with that, Seraphine does the same thing as well. It's also not even a bad idea to take the Lux away, right? So you could R1, R2 Lux here and put it Lux ADC. if your ADC has experience on Lux. She's pretty strong in the actual ADC role right now. So AP carries in general are always a good answer into Caitlyn. Anyone that can clear the wave from a safe distance. If Caitlyn's just going even, getting a couple plates, not really getting kills early, she is weaker than some of these APCs or a more carry-based champion like Aphelios. So just some food for thought for the future. If we have those flex picks in the bag, that is always a good pick to knock out. So R2 here, red side goes with the Olaf. This is an interesting pick. I do have the context that the jungler was specifically asking for Olaf here, so I'm not going to go off about like, hey, this is a bad jungler, you shouldn't just be blinding this, blah, blah, blah. Talk about the upsides here is, hey, Olaf is very good into Caitlyn, actually. Caitlyn has a hard time peeling off of Olaf simply because all of her defense mechanisms are traps, really. She has the net as well, but the slow wouldn't play in with Olaf ulti. Olaf can run straight through the traps. So it's not a bad pick into Kate in general, especially assuming, hey, they're going to be picking the Lux since we didn't pick it away. So, hey, now Olaf is really good into Kate and Lux. You have a good dive onto the backline. And then in theory here, it is a top, mid, and jungle flex pick. Is that the case for the team picking it? Maybe not. But GOATED doesn't know if that's been practiced or not, right? Olaf is a good pick mid lane into any melee champions, low range. Top lane, he has a lot of winning matchups. And jungle, he's still viable in the jungle. He's still being played. Granted, he has a good amount of bad matchups, and there are a lot of counters to Olaf. A lot of ways to play around him. Realistically, GOATED could just lock in a Trundle and just match Olaf wherever he goes, and Olaf is just very sad. So I will say this is a big vulnerability that could be exploited. But if the player is confident in the pick, sometimes you just got to pick what you feel is right in the moment and base your draft around it, right? It's still early in the draft, so you could morph your draft around whatever blue side pivots into and try to make a strong team. Varus Olaf, though, you're immediately leaning towards a dive, go-in comp. Varus gives you a little bit of poke, and then once you want to engage with the Corrupted Change, it should work out pretty nicely. So GOATED goes with the immediate B2 Jax, and as we expect, the B3 Lux. So GOATED is picking Jax, assuming that it's an Olaf top, right? Jax does okay into Olaf. It's about a 50-50 matchup, if my recollection serves me right, and obviously Jax is going to outscale. We also have the risk of a Jax jungle here, although I really wouldn't be too worried about a Jax jungle personally. It's not very strong. It really can't do too much early game. It has pretty weak ganks. And with a Kate Lux, you generally want a strong jungler that can work with your prio, and then you could start pushing into early game dragons. So on red side now, it's pretty much always going to be a support here, right? You have their bot lane locked in. It's very, very low chance that's going to be a Lux mid just because of the Kate Lux synergy. So we have the Varus, we have the Olaf. At this point, we're pretty much balls to the wall. So we're cool with, any sort of bot lane engage, really. So we're talking Leona, we're talking Nautilus, we're talking Rakan, we're talking even a Pike angle maybe. That's probably only if you're very, very good at Pike, but all these champions kind of fit the bill here. Anything engaged. So Nautilus does come in. Big fan of this pick. Big fan of the bot lane, personally. I think the red side bot lane is a lot easier to execute. If we're talking pure theory, blue side bot lane always has an advantage. Kate Lux, in theory, pretty much only has a swing with something like Lucian Nami, where Lucian Nami could flip the game early, right? Or Aphelios Lulu, where they could have a very flippy level 1, level 2. But Kate Lux, Varus not. I'd rather have the Varus not in pretty much every elo under pro. So, again, talking about team comps here, right? So now we have R4, R5 open for Griddle. We have your mid and your top. Generally, you're going to want to be saving that counter pick for your top lane unless your mid has a disgusting bag with some really good counter picks here, and your top lane wants to weak side. And that's actually a very reasonable case here of putting your top lane weak side. Since you have the Varus Nut, it is no longer a weak side lane. You could actually play towards this lane. Kate Lux is going to try to push, right? Jungler is going to try to follow up on their push. So it's pretty reasonable to 3v3 bot here. Realistically, you then maybe want someone with mid with prio as a good counter pick into their mid laner, and you just push bot. And then your R4 is just, hey, safe bruiser, top laner, lane neutralizer, whether it's a Renekton, a Rumble, an Ornn, a Mundo, a Scion, something along those lines, right? You're not really going to have too many counter pick matchups. We're already assuming it is probably a Jax top, so we could pick with that in mind too, right? It could be that Jax jungle. I'm not going to rule that out, but hey, let's pick something that is one, good into Jax, and hey, is a lane neutralizer. If I'm just talking pure theory here, we're thinking like Rumble. For sure. Rumble is good into Jax. Really just strong lane neutralizers. No bad matchups for Rumble. But if you're locking in the Renekton here, if you're locking in the Aatrox, and if you're locking in the Mundo, if you're locking in the Scion, right, I'm not mad at any of that. And I actually think I would tend to lock in a top laner R4 here personally. Give my mid laner a bit of grace. Let him have a good matchup and let him take that lead that he's able to build and move that into our bot lane and use our Varus as our win con here, right? Because it's very awkward for the Olaf to have to try to play topside on an R5 counter pick when his mid is getting countered, and now Caitlux has push, and they have to somehow help bot lane from getting a Dove 4v3. So that's something to keep in mind with the Caitlux, right? And this is something that's negated if we do pick the Ziggs or the Seraphine or the Lux ourselves. Now we have a weak side bot lane that we don't want to play towards, and now we could use that R5 counter pick to go topside. So picking the Varus not actually kind of forces us into an R4 top here. So just some food for thought here. In terms of bans, obviously for Team Griddle, if you are assuming that is a Jax top as an answer to Olaf, you're probably banning junglers that Olaf doesn't want to see. Just no real mid laners we're too scared of at this point, in my opinion, unless he's a one trick or has some sort of like super strong viability. Essentially, since we're R5ing, we would in theory be R5ing the mid laner, right? So I'm really only banning junglers here. And that is exactly what Griddle does. They banned the Trundle, which I mentioned before. Sorry, I got these initial... did I get the initial... Yeah, I got the initial bans wrong. My fault. So the initial bans were Viego, Jarvan, Smolder. Sorry, I hit the formatting of a drafter.lol. And then the second wave bans are going to be your Wukong. And there's that Trundle I mentioned earlier. Goated's going to take out the Lissandra and the Galio. So Goated is actually kind of banning like you're going to R4 a top laner here and R5 your mid lane, right? It wouldn't make sense to ban mid laners if they knew they were going to have mid lane counter pick. So they're expecting an R4 top lane blind here. And just, having the free counter pick to have so you can pick whatever champion you want. Although they think the Olaf is top lane. So I think they're kind of lost in what they should be banning here. They're not sure where the Olaf's going. So they're just taking out Lissandra and Galio. Probably have a plan in mind of what they want to pick mid. It seems like some sort of AP assassin, something that gets really done bad by getting locked down. My immediate instinct's actually kind of like a Katarina with a Lissandra Galio ban. And I'd really want to see what they pop up mid here, but we decide to go the Ahri R4 on Griddle. Again, this deviates from what I said, but what I said was a theory, and in actuality draft you have timers. You can't hard to think about these things. These are kind of the benefits of having either a game plan going in or a coach helping you with this. So going with the Ahri here, big fan of the Ahri pick R4. Ahri is super strong this patch with the buff to her W. She has not too many losing lanes. Generally, the answer to Ahri is just picking a control mage and farming up against her to keep out of her range. So something like an Orianna and a Azir. If you really want to get spicy, a Sylas is a fun matchup. There are obviously some assassin plays Ahri's not super happy with. But you're never really going to go wrong with the Ahri. And I am a fan of the extra backline engage onto that Caitlyn Lux. She also does well into Jax overall. Ahri is a strong pick here. Good job on this pick. If you were going to go mid lane blind, this is probably one of the picks to do outside of something like a very standard control mage. So Goated makes this drop very exciting by going Karthus and going Master Yi. So Goated's team composition is now very clear on what they want to do. Kate Lux, you guys are going to win the early game for us. You're going to play a winning lane, and you're going to let Karthus, Master Yi, and Jax scale. Basically, blue side is saying, hey, if this game goes 30 plus minutes, we have a 90+% chance of winning unless we're down like 12k gold. No game's 100% chance, but they have a very, very, very high chance of winning if this game does go super long. So it kind of doesn't work, though, because their Kate Lux was already kind of nullified by the Varus Knot, and we did talk about how important it is to have Prio mid to support that Kate Lux lane, and exposing the Karthus as your mid laner, which is one, not a good pick into Ahri. Ahri does a very good job of having engage onto Karthus, slightly outranging him, good damage burst before he could do anything about it. I forgot my original point. Yeah, Kate Lux just does not have a good time here. You really want to have that mid lane prio that could help you set up dives, right? You want to do 4v2 dive spot with your jungler, who is Master Yi, who now cannot do any diving bot lane, cannot really support any of your lanes. You now, in theory, have a losing lane mid, a most likely losing lane top because you're going to be counterpicked, and then a neutral lane bot lane that really can swing either side by a level 3 gank. So if I'm red side here, I'm celebrating, right? I think this is a very, very one draft at this point. The only real weakness is that your bot lane getting smashed 2v2, which is always a possibility against Kate Lux, right? They get 1-2 kills on a lucky 2v2 or an early game gank, and the lane just snowballs. You're not really at risk of an early game gank with the E here. So really, if I'm red side, I'm just looking for a strong team fight now. You're kind of opposite of game 1, where, hey, we already have a really, really strong team fight here. We have a good pick comp. Let's keep that the same consistency. Let's pick comfort into Jax, something that's winning here. We could pick something like, tank like Cho'Gath, Jace. But Jace isn't a tank, sorry. But Jace is always a good pick. Urgot. Any pick that is fine into Jax. You could pick the Gragas. You could pick the Cassante. You could pick the Ornn. Really, Jax is not going to be punishing too many of your lanes unless you're playing a fighting lane, which I don't see the necessity of it here. Rumble is also still an option. Although having the extra CC for the Master Yi is never going to hurt. You guys do have plenty between Varus, Nautilus, and Ahri. But you can never have too much. Same with the Karthus. You do want to lock him down. So, there's a plethora of picks here, and I don't think many of them are very wrong. It's really just, hey, like, pick a champion that doesn't lose super hard Jax that you're confident in. The pick ends up being Cassante. I don't even know if he's on this app either. He is not. Sorry, I'm using... Back in the day, this had every champion. So it is Cassante on the R5. To me, again, fine pick. Really, you want to be playing towards bot side, so I think it's a good weaker side champion that doesn't really lose to Jax. Scales well, will have good CC for the team fights, will be a good job at eating someone out of the fight. I really think you do want to probably eat the Karthus out of the fight, make sure you can't dive into the middle of your team. I'm going to give this draft like an A for Griddle. I really think the main grief here is early picking that Ahri. I think imagine if we pick something like the Cassante R4. Let's say they still go, Karthus, Yi, B4, B5. You have set up for a really good counter pick into the Karthus. Something like the Kassadin or the Twisted Fate, who would just now constantly dive bot with no threat, right? And then you could snowball the early game. You could pick the old Blanc that's just going to keep snowballing onto the Karthus, keep getting kills. You could pick a Fizz. Karthus lose to a plethora of mid lane champions that he has no chance against, right? And that mid lane lead can just be snowballed into the bot or the top lane. And now you don't have the same risk of game 1 where, hey, my mid lane has a lead. I don't properly actually follow up on it and he gets shut down. Well, who's going to shut him down? The Master Yi? He might, but, at that point, there's a more fundamental issues than draft. It is gameplay issue. This is the easiest situation you'll have as a mid laner to get a strong counter pick into that Karthus and really just take over the game. Now, granted, they might have not picked the Karthus if the Ahri was being shown, but with the bans, it looks like they were setting up the Karthus, and this is not a good matchup for Karthus anyway, so it seems like they were pretty locked on that opinion there. But overall, this draft was much more succinct, makes a lot more sense than draft 1 to me for Griddle. It did end up in a victory, even though it went 40 minutes, which was that like 90+% mark for GOATED. However, the team fight is just a little bit too disgusting for Griddle, for GOATED to ever really deal with, and that Kate Lux does fall off a bit of a cliff. And Varus is unfortunately a pretty broken champion right now. So that game went pretty well, and we'll call this a successful draft.